Hello friends, and welcome to our channel. Before you dive into this story, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications and get ready to leave a comment. Because the tale I'm about to tell you isn't just about steel and war. It's about paradoxes, brilliant failures, and how the most unsuccessful project can become the key to the greatest victory. If you love history, technology, and mysteries, you're in the right place. And by the end, I'm sure you'll be eager to share your own thoughts. Let's begin. October 1943. The disappointment that came with hope. Picture this. Autumn 1943. Somewhere near a Ukrainian or Belarusian town, reduced to smoldering rubble, stands a Soviet tanker, a sergeant or a lieutenant, covered in soot and mud. He has just received a brand new machine, smelling of fresh paint and diesel. He's used to his old KVs, cramped, sluggish, fuel-guzzling fortresses on tracks. But he climbs into the turret, and he feels not cramped, but a sense of space. He sees not crooked, inconvenient hatches, but a well-thought-out layout. He hears the steady, confident rumble of the V2 diesel engine, promising not to let him down. This is the IS-1, Iosif Stalin, the pride, the hope, the answer to the German cats, the tigers, and the panthers. And so, this very tanker goes out on his first combat mission. He sees in the distance that very same, already dreaded, angular silhouette of a tiger. He is in a new machine with a new, powerful gun. His heart pounds with excitement and confidence. He catches the enemy in his sights, fires a shot. The shell flies, hits, and ricochets off the frontal armor of the German Predator like a pea off a wall. The distance is over 800 meters. His own armor holds for now, but he understands he is not the hunter. He is the target. He is the reluctant hero who must let this beast get almost point blank to deliver a mortal wound. And the chances of walking away alive from such a duel are slim. It is from this moment of euphoria, replaced by bitter disappointment, that my story begins. The story of an unsuccessful tank. A tank that barely saw combat. A tank that became the most important and most unnoticed mistake of the Soviet tank industry. Without its failure, there would have been no victory. Sounds like a paradox? It is. Let's figure it out. Chapter 1. The death rattle of a Titan. Why the KV was doomed. To understand why the IS-1 was needed at all, we need to go back a year or a year and a half to the very inferno, the summer of 1943. The Battle of Kursk. It was here that Soviet tank crews and designers received a cruel and merciless lesson. Until then, it seemed we had a decent heavy tank, the KV Klim Voroshilov. It was a true marvel of engineering at the start of the war. In 1941, practically no German gun could penetrate its armor. It was an invulnerable monster. But the coin had another side. Economic and historical context. The price of a monster. War is not just battles. It is a giant economic machine. The production of a single KV, one in 1942, cost the state not just rubles, but tons of metal, thousands of man-hours of work in factories evacuated beyond the Urals. It was expensive, complex, and, most importantly, very heavy. Its weight of nearly 60 tons made it sluggish. It broke bridges and was an absolute nightmare for drivers and repair crews. And its 76mm gun, which was a formidable weapon in 41, was hopelessly obsolete by 43. And then, at the Battle of Kursk, it appears the Tiger. The Germans, taught by the bitter experience of encountering our T-34s and KVs, created not just a tank, but a mobile, permanent firing point. Its long-barreled 88mm gun was already a legend since the war in Spain, where it was used as an anti-aircraft gun. It could penetrate the frontal armor of our KV from a distance of 1.5 kilometers. And our KV could only respond in kind from 300 or 400 meters, provided it managed to get that close alive. Imagine this scene. Your armor, which was your main protection, suddenly becomes useless. You've transformed from an invulnerable Titan into a slow, sluggish target. KV crews suffered monstrous losses. An urgent response was needed. Very urgent. There was no time to create something from scratch with years of testing. the war wouldn't wait. Chapter 2. A brilliant improvisation. The birth of Iosif Stalin. And here begins what I call the miracle of Soviet engineering. This miracle lay not in inventing the wheel, but in assembling a new, racing bicycle from old parts. The country's leadership and the People's Commissariat of the tank industry understood that the KV was a dead end. A new machine was needed, and this task was taken up by the Special Design Bureau, SKB, at the Chelyabinsk-Kirov plant, CHKZ, led by Joseph Yakovlevich Kotin, a brilliant organizer and designer. He had a fantastic ability to find unconventional solutions under the most severe time constraints. And such a solution existed. Even before the Battle of Kursk, work was underway on the KV-13 project. It was an attempt to create a medium tank with heavy armor, something between the T-34 and the KV. A lighter, faster, but well-protected chassis. It was this that they decided to re-heavy. My opinion and analysis. This, in my view, is the highest form of skill. The Germans, when faced with a problem, often went down the path of creating complex, polished to a shine, but expensive and difficult to manufacture machines. Think of the Tiger or the King Tiger. Soviet engineers took the path of pragmatic improvisation. They took what was already almost ready and began to radically rework it. It's like having an old but reliable car engine, and instead of developing a new one from scratch, you bore out its cylinders, install new turbos, and double its power. This is exactly what they did with the KV-13. They increased the armor to 120 millimeters in the front. They enlarged the turret ring diameter, that crucial ring on which the turret rotates. This was critical because they needed to fit a new gun into this new, more spacious turret, the 85mm D5T gun. The tactical trick worked 100%. Formally, this was a deep modernization of the existing KV. In reality, it was a new machine. It was given the name IS-1 after the Supreme Commander. While German designers spent months and years polishing every rivet on their Tiger, in Chelyabinsk, in an incredible rush, an adequate response was born. The price for this speed was the main internal conflict of the IS-1. Chapter 3. The drama of the caliber, the gun that was late to the war. And so we come to the very heart of the IS-1's drama. Its gun. The 85mm D5T gun was, without exaggeration, a masterpiece. Compared to the guns on the KV and T-34-76, it was a giant leap forward. Unitary round. The shell and cartridge case were combined into one piece. This dramatically increased the rate of fire. The IS-1 crew could fire up to 8 rounds per minute. For comparison, the future IS-2 with its 122mm gun managed only 2 or 3. Imagine the advantage this gave in close combat against infantry and lightly armored targets. Excellent ballistics. The shell flew fast and true. Power. It was capable of shattering any German medium tank PZ.4 or self-propelled gun based on it into splinters. But, and this is a huge, but it was the perfect weapon for the end of 1942, the beginning of 43. But the IS-1 started arriving at the front in the autumn of 43. And in that time, the rules of the game had changed again. Let's look at the dry numbers from your table, but I'll translate them into human language. Armor penetration of the 85mm D5T gun, BR-365K shell. At 100 meters, about 100 millimeters. At 500 meters, about 92 millimeters. At 1,000 meters, about 82 millimeters. Now let's look at the armor of its main adversaries. The Tiger. Hull front, 100 millimeters, but positioned almost vertically. Turret front, 100 millimeters. But the gun mantlet, up to 120 millimeters. So, head-on, at a kilometer, the IS-1 could only penetrate the Tiger in very lucky spots, and couldn't penetrate the mantlet at all. The Panther. Now here was a real tragedy. The Panther's hull front was 85 millimeters. Seems less, right? But it was positioned at a fantastic angle of 55 degrees. What is the angle of armor slope? It's physics. A shell hitting an inclined plate meets much greater resistance. It has to penetrate what is effectively a greater thickness. So, the effective thickness of the Panther's front hull was over 140 millimeters. For the IS-1's gun, this was practically an impenetrable barrier at all but the shortest distances. What did this mean for the IS-1 crew on the battlefield? It meant this. You see a Tiger or a Panther. They see you. Their guns can hit from 2, even 2.5 kilometers away. Your gun only reaches 800 to 1,000 meters, and even then it doesn't penetrate. Your only chance is to show incredible coolness, maneuver under fire, endure, pray you aren't killed on the approach, and close into 500 meters. And 500 meters for a tanker is point-blank range. It's almost certain death. The IS-1 was not a hunter. It was a buffer. It was the guy who had to take the first, most terrible blow and, at the cost of his own life, create the conditions for others to win. It was a tank of selfless heroes who had no choice. Chapter 4. A Failure by Design. The Short Life of the First ISF. So, we come to the sad finale of the IS-1's combat career. Its service was short and, for the most part, unremarkable. Only about 107 machines were built, a paltry number by the standards of that war. For comparison, over 80,000 T-34s were made. Most IS-1s didn't even get to fight properly. They were very quickly transferred to training units, where they prepared crews for future, more advanced machines. And many were converted right at the factories or in the field into the next legendary model, the IS-2. It would seem, here it is, a story of failure. They built a tank, spent effort, time, resources, and it didn't live up to expectations. You could write it off as a failure. But, and here's the most interesting part, I believe this is where the IS-1's main success lies. Chapter 5. Strategic Triumph. How failure on the battlefield became victory in the workshop. Tactically, the IS-1 often lost. But strategically, it was an absolute 100% triumph. It became that critically important technological beachhead, without which all subsequent victories would have been impossible. Let's break down what was so priceless about this failure. 1. Perfecting the layout. For the first time in a Soviet heavy tank, that classic scheme was implemented, which would later be used on the IS-2, IS-3, and all post-war heavy tanks up to the T-10. A spacious turret on an enlarged turret ring. 3 crew members in the turret, commander, gunner, loader, finally got the opportunity to work without getting in each other's way. This increased efficiency many times over. Rational armor layout. Armor plates were positioned at large angles, increasing effective armor thickness without increasing its actual weight. This was a direct response to the German approach. A powerful and reliable V2 IS engine. This diesel became the heart for the entire IS series. 2. A new chassis. The IS-1 was the first to use a chassis with 6 large road wheels per side. This was a revolution after the KV with its small wheels. The new suspension was more reliable, provided a smoother ride, and was simpler to produce and repair. This chassis, with minor changes, was later used on the IS-2 and the famous IS-3 with its pike nose. 3. And most importantly, it served as a test bed for the D5T gun mount. It was the operation of the IS-1 in the troops, the reports from the front, the accounts of combat encounters that gave the designers that priceless, blood-written conclusion from the crews. The 85mm caliber is not enough. Experience showed, against the new German tanks, evolution is not enough. A revolution is needed. A caliber is needed that won't scratch the armor, but will shatter it with one blow. And this solution was found instantly. They looked at the extremely powerful 122mm A19 core gun. What if we put in a tank? Asked someone brilliant. And they did. Thus, the D25T gun was born, which became the main caliber of the IS-2. The 122mm shell didn't just penetrate the Tiger's armor. It crushed it, tore off turrets, caused ammunition detonations. It broke the backbone of German tank power, not only physically, but also morally. German tank crews became afraid of head-on collisions. And all of this became possible only thanks to the IS-1. Without this failure, there would not have been the IS-2, which became the true symbol of victory, the terror of German tanks, and one of the strongest tanks of the Second World War. The IS-1 was that sacrificial swallow that crashed against the cliff of reality, showing the way for a whole flock of eagles. Epilogue. History lessons we must not forget. So what do we have in the end? We have a brilliant example of the fact that in history, and not just military history, there are no simple assessments. You can't look at things in black and white. The IS-1 is a tank paradox, a tactical failure and a strategic victory, an apparent failure and a hidden triumph. It teaches us that sometimes the shortest path to success is through a series of failures, that it's important to be able to admit your mistakes and correct them immediately. The Soviet designers did not stubbornly continue producing a knowingly weak tank. They used it as a stepping stone, a springboard for a grand leap forward. In our time, in business, in technology, in life, we are often afraid of failure. We want to create the perfect product right away. But the history of the IS-1 screams at us, don't be afraid. Create, try, make mistakes, but learn from your mistakes instantly. Sometimes your biggest failure will become the foundation for your greatest success. This machine deserves not ridicule or oblivion, but immense respect. It was a necessary and heroic stage of a great journey. Without this failure, there would have been no our victory. And there is no paradox in that. In that lies the harsh truth of war and the genius of the people who forged it. And so our story comes to an end. I've told it to you as I see it myself, with pain for the crews, with admiration for the engineers, and with an understanding of the complexity of those events. What do you think about this? Do you agree with my assessment of the IS-1? Maybe you have your own point of view? I'm really looking forward to your comments. Let's discuss this amazing page of history together. And of course, if you found it interesting, be sure to subscribe to our channel, like this story, and share it with your friends. There are many more untold stories and tank legends ahead of us. See you soon.